Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this live stream. My name is Hassam Hassina, and I'm the lead for the Reactor in the Middle East and Africa. And the Reactors, as you know, are hubs for founders and developers to meet, learn, and connect to local peers and learn from the industry experts all about what's happening in technology, data science, machine learning, AI, and all the technologies as well that are within the Microsoft ecosystem. Before we begin, I would like to quickly remind you that this Reactor event follows the Reactor Code of Conduct. So in short, we're all here to learn. Let's be aware of each other, friendly, patient, welcoming, open to all viewing points and questions, kind and considerate to others at all time, and understanding of each other's differences. We're streaming, so you can send us questions through the chat, and we will be going over these questions during today's session. Today's session is a continuation of a series. And today we are going to talk more about making sense of data with Power BI. We're joined by Joe, who is going to take us through this learning journey. Thank you, Joe, for joining us today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Before we begin, I would love to quickly remind you that there is a Cloud Skills Challenge that you can be taking part of and maximizing your learning experience. So you can scan this QR code or go to this link, which I will post in the chat for all of you to continue learning. So without any further delay, I would love for Joe to take us through today's session. And ask us as many questions. We are looking at that and we're live. So thank you again, Joe, for joining us. Let us know what are we gonna go over today.
Yeah, so as we have sort of been doing throughout the series, we're diving deep into the various different sort of Power Platform apps and services. And today we're really going to be focusing on what we can do with Power BI. So in terms of broad agenda, we'll just give you a bit of a quick recap in terms of what the Power Platform is, just in case there's any sort of knowledge gaps there, and really so we can contextualize where Power BI fits into the grander scheme of things. And then we're just going to go through and talk at a very high level in terms of some of the key features of the product. Why might we want to consider using Power BI in the first place? What are some of the features and capabilities that are on offer with the tool itself? And we'll jump into a demonstration and see how we can start to use the Power BI not only in isolation, but also in combination with some of the other tools that we've got within the Power Platform as well. We'll finish off by talking about some additional resources and help that you can get from the community. And then finally, as I was told this a long time ago, but any session that you should run should always have some call to actions. So we'll have a couple of those at the end as well. We'll also leave some time towards the end for any Q&A as well, but at any time you can just sort of post a question in the chat. I've got the two screens open over here, so I'll try and answer any questions as when they come up. So please feel free to get involved, be as interactive as possible. I want to make sure this session is going to be as valuable for you as possible. So just to very quickly introduce myself. So hello, my name is Joe Griffin. I am a Business Applications MVP and MCT based in the UK. In my day-to-day life, I run the UK subsidiary of a Microsoft partner known as Promex, and I'm the UK-based CEO. When it comes to working with Power BI and the Power Platform more generally, I tend to come from a more technical sort of focus, having previously spent my time working as a .NET developer and a SQL Server developer, and really sort of moved into Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform as I started to see the benefits that this technology can sort of do. So I tend to get involved as a technical architect, get hands-on where possible as well, and very much enjoy speaking to others about the Power Platform and the benefits of this technology. So really pleased to be with you today and hope I'll be able to share some useful and interesting information with you all today. So as a quick reminder then, okay, we've been talking about in the previous sessions, the Power Platform itself. Effectively what we've got within here are sort of four key sort of products that we'd work with. A fifth one has just recently been announced, which is our Power Pages, having previously been included as part of Power Apps when we needed to have those sort of bespoke portals. Aside from that, our Power Apps will typically be used when we need to do some rapid low-code development, where we need to very quickly and easily build out an app that is based off our existing data model, or an app that needs to run maybe on desktop or mobile, or indeed on perhaps maybe even a tablet device. With our Power Apps, with our low-code development environment that this technology provides, we can very quickly and easily build a range of different business programs that can suit different sort of needs and simplify the whole application development process. From there, we've got our Power Automate technology that we can use, which allows us to create these automated workflows between our different apps and services. And really, the sweet spot in terms of what we can achieve with this tool is all around automating those repetitive business processes, things that may be taking us many hours or many days of our time each week to sort of do. With Power Automate, we can take this tool as our new best friend. We can look to integrate this with our different core business systems. And it becomes very easy for beginners and also experts and developers to come in and use this tool to build out these different integration touch points. Other tools that we've got in the Power Platform includes our Power Virtual Agents, where we need to have an artificial intelligence-based chatbot that we can maybe deploy out onto a Microsoft Teams website, or maybe even give access to our own customers as well if we wanted to. And really, what's nice about Power Virtual Agents is that you can use this to maybe replace and provide self-service capabilities on a 24/7 basis. And Power Virtual Agents will also integrate alongside our Power Automate cloud flows as well to unlock additional possibilities. Underneath all of this, we've got the benefits of being able to leverage a range of different data connectors to be able to connect to well over 800 different apps and services. We can use Microsoft DATAVERSE as our foundational data source in the Power Platform itself, which can be really valuable from a standpoint in terms of allowing us to formalize the way we sort of store our data. And finally, AI Builder, which we can use as a turnkey solution to bring in artificial intelligence-based capabilities into our overall solution. And Power BI, we would typically term as our analytics portion of the Power Platform. And this is the tool that we're going to be getting into a bit more detail about today. So really, when we're talking about the Power Platform, it's important to focus on the value that this can deliver as an overall solution. Not only can we start to equip ourselves to deliver value a lot faster in the organization or in the enterprise, but we can also adapt to changing business processes. We can adapt to the changing expectations of our workforce and create these really effective digital experiences. So as previously in the past, it would maybe take be an incredibly costly exercise to bring in a developer to build out an application and automate our different systems together. All of this no longer is a time-consuming or expensive exercise. We can become, as an organization, a lot more agile, deliver value in maybe weeks as opposed to months, and from there start to iterate further as and when things become more, or as and when we've been able to demonstrate the initial value that the solution can deliver. And what I, as a developer, particularly like as well about the Power Platform is that it does support extensibility and the ability to extend out further when needed. So if we need to, for example, write a C# plugin to automate some server-side processes, if we need to modify the interface by using TypeScript or React or maybe AngularJS, all of this is supported ultimately. And we as developers can focus on those more difficult sort of niche cases and all of the simple and easy to do things in terms of maybe building out an application interface, building out a report. All of this can be achieved instead using these low-code tools on here. So it really does ensure that we can, focus our attention and empower people in the organization to actually do a lot of the things that we as developers would traditionally be required to do instead. So as you mentioned already, with Power Apps, we're going to be having these different sort of apps that connect to maybe different sources that we have across the organization. This could be maybe Dataverse or perhaps maybe others, such as perhaps SQL Server, SharePoint, even could be third-party products, such as maybe Salesforce or SAP, as an example, and build out these apps that run incredibly well, both on the desktop and also as well within our web browser as well. So it becomes very easy to build and deploy these out. We can iterate and build them out and push them out further as and when we need to, and really focus on building these effective task-based or task-oriented interfaces to accomplish key tasks within the organization. With Power Automate, as you mentioned, it's all about the automation. We can automate all the things with this tool. So whether we're just looking for some simple automation to deal with maybe some personal productivity issues that we have, maybe we want to, for example, go into our email inbox and download all of our email attachments in one fell swoop. Or if we wanted to start to bring our different business systems together, maybe generate approvals based on certain conditions as and when they're met, or if we're wanting to link together our key business systems. With Power Automate, we have the capabilities on here. And also as well, regardless of where our systems or applications may be, whether they are in the cloud or maybe on-premise or even indeed legacy applications, Power Automate can be used to start to bring these together, in ways that would have been quite difficult or challenging, in the past. Our chatbots, as we mentioned, we'd use these to be able to surface out these self-service chatbots that could provide information at the right time in the right place. We can use these chatbots to accept a variety of different inputs from maybe our colleagues or end users. And then from there, this information can then be integrated alongside our Power Automate cloud flows to be able to do things on the customer's behalf. So maybe, for example, go off and get the status of a current order in the system, maybe look to arrange a callback, maybe during the daytime. There's a variety of different things that our chatbots can do, particularly when we start to bring the Cloudflow capability into the mix here. As I mentioned with DATAVERSE, this is going to be our foundational data source. So maybe we're looking to migrate away from an Excel-based process. Maybe we've got a legacy application or system, maybe something like Microsoft Access or something more. With DATAVERSE, we can look to formalize this within the Power Platform. We get as part of this a database as a service or a product that we can use to very quickly and easily model out our core business data, and also look to integrate this alongside other key Microsoft products that we may be using. And this could be maybe Dynamics 365, could be Microsoft Azure. It really doesn't matter in terms of how we go there. But with the DATAVERSE in place, we can set ourselves up for success and start to build out a variety of different key applications with ease. So when we start to bring all this together, we looked at the different sort of capabilities on here. Not only are we going to have these really nice integration touch points across these different Microsoft services, but also a wider family of products, not only Microsoft related as well. We can start to tap into some of the process automation capabilities within the platform itself. So our Power Automate allows and supports these different automations targeting either desktop-based scenarios or automations in the cloud, or even where we're just looking to ensure that a business process is being followed from start to finish. From there, we can then surface out a variety of different user experiences, some of which we would maybe build ourselves, others that we can maybe look to bring into the equation and integrate alongside tools that we're already using day in and day out, such as Microsoft Teams, and also additional integration touch points into other further products as well. So there's a lot that we can do here, a lot that we can take off the shelf and start using. And as I mentioned already, and this is particularly of benefit to me as a developer, we can look to extend these out with custom code as and when we need to. So a lot of potential on here and a lot of ability to get going a lot quicker if and when we need to. So that just gives you a bit of a quick recap and sets the stage for what we're going to be talking about. Hopefully some of this or all of that should be familiar already. So let's actually jump in and start talking about the meat of what we are here for today, which is Power BI. So with Power BI, what we have here is a collection of software, services, apps, and connectors that work together to turn our unrelated sources of data into coherent, visually immersive, and interactive insights. So whether our data is in a simple Microsoft Excel workbook or a collection of cloud-based and on-premise hybrid data warehouses, Power BI lets us easily connect to our data sources, clean and model our data without affecting the underlying source, and then visualize and discover what's important with that data. From there, we can look to share this out across to maybe to other colleagues in the organization, or deploy out our solution so it's maybe available to a much wider audience, maybe to our end customers, or to maybe a public audience as well if we wanted to. And before we start going into more detail around Power BI, it's really important that we set the stage around some of the key concepts, some of the key things that come up very often that we need to have a good awareness of when working with the tool. So the first most important concept is our capacities. And this effectively represents the resources that we have at our disposal to host and deliver our Power BI content. What's nice about these capacities is that they can either be dedicated just for our use as an organization to power our own content, or we can look to use a shared capacity. And therefore, our total cost of ownership for the solution will be much reduced. And in some cases, we can use Power BI completely free of charge without having to pay any money whatsoever. Typically, a good rule of thumb for Power BI is that if we need to start to think about sharing our content across maybe multiple users, this will be where we typically need to come in and maybe start paying for a subscription or a license. Typically, Power BI Professional will be the entry point for us in that regard. From there, we've got our workspaces, and these act as our containers for the various different key Power BI content that we would look to produce. So we can effectively look to host our content within a personal workspace, which anybody the world over can set up and work with. The key thing here is that our own personal workspace is just for our own access. If we wanted to maybe think about collaborating or sharing the content out within a wider audience, then we'd need to set up an additional shared workspace that will be used for this content instead. What's nice about the shared workspaces is that we can then look to add in colleagues from a variety of different areas of the organization. Colleagues can then share and collaborate in the content that we produce, and it becomes a lot easier for us to then sort of manage that and then look to formalize that as part of a unified solution later on down the road. Because what our workspaces also support is the ability to then convert these into apps, which will be a fully built solution, which will be ready for us to start using and consuming in the organization. From there, we have our data sets. This is going to be what our Power BI reports will typically connect to. And we would look to bring together data from a variety of different sources into a single unified place. From there, we can then start to make these available as part of shared data sets, which can then be used as a single source of truth across the organization. And then these data sets will then power our reports, which typically will be multiple pages of content where we're surfacing out several different visualizations. These could be maybe a line chart, could be a map, a tree map. We've got a lot of flexibility there in terms of how we build those out. Also as well in terms of how they're then consumed. It could be that people just have read-only access over this, or they also could have the ability to edit these reports as well, which is quite nice. And then finally, the dashboards will be something that we would create and manage within the online service only. And this is where we look to bring together content from multiple different reports into a single canvas view. As part of this, we can have several different tiles and widgets. We can look to maybe embed in additional content from services such as our Q&A feature, or maybe also bring in streaming data sets as well, and have this as our central point where we navigate to within the Power BI to be able to sort of look at and work with our content. And a key thing to remember with our dashboards is that you would need to always ensure that you create those and manage those within the online service. So got a great question in the chat here. Daniel Westerdale was asking, why does being able to generate a PDF from a BI report need premium workspaces? I believe that's because the capability there requires you to have dedicated capacity to be able to sort of do that. So any sort of more intensive feature that would such as that would require dedicated capacity, and therefore you would need to have either a premium workspace or a premium per user license assigned to your user account to take advantage of them. Now, to help you get a flavor for what is possible here, we can look to download one or several different template apps from the App Source store. And this is something that's available to every user within the Power BI portal. And we've got a variety of different apps on here which are effectively good to go. We've got ones, for example, that allow us to track data for COVID-19 infections in the US. We've got apps that link out to services that we may be working with already, such as maybe GitHub or QuickBooks as an example. And all we need to do with these apps is just input our relevant credentials and login details, and we'll have a fully unified solution ready to go. So the apps can act as a really nice way of us being able to get a feel for what is the art of the possible here with Power BI. And we ourselves as users can actually go in and create a fully working app as well if we wanted to. So definitely worth just checking these out to see what is possible on here and to get maybe a bit of inspiration yourself when you're getting started for the very first time. So the most important thing we always do from a Power BI standpoint is get some data in. And as we mentioned already, we've got wide support for a lot of different data sources on here. It's well in the hundreds of different possible connectors that we have available to us. What we should tend to find here is that we've got broad parity in terms of data sources compared with our other Power Platform solutions. But just one thing just to keep in mind is that it won't be an exact one-for-one list. And part of the reason for this is that the approach and the technical steps for setting up these connectors is slightly different from a Power BI standpoint. Nevertheless, we should find good support across our different core Microsoft services, as well as other third-party providers as well. And we can even go for a lot more deeper here, provided we've got an appropriate driver that supports either ODBC or OLDB, we can also use those data sources as well. So I probably would make the rather bold claim that there's probably going to be it's going to be possible to connect Power BI to feasibly any different data source. Granted, there will be ones that will be a bit more challenging than others to connect with, but I've yet to find a source or a data source that Power BI doesn't support in some shape or format. It will just simply come down to the difficulty involved in terms of connecting to it. And there may be certain situations where a custom connector may be required as well. And that's where we would need to get involved from a developer standpoint. So when it comes to working with Power BI on a day-to-day basis, there are really three key tools that we'd work with. The desktop application is probably going to be the area where we spend maybe 60% or 70% of our time. This is a Windows-based application that we can download onto our machine from the Microsoft website. It's also available within the Microsoft Store as well. And on here, we can not only build out our reports, but look to actually connect to and model out our data. And indeed, Power BI Desktop will be the only tool that we can use to effectively model out our data in the way that we'll sort of see. So the typical flow will be that we'll start off using Power BI Desktop, and this will be the most common thing that we work with. We're at a point when we're ready to look to publish out this content, maybe so we ourselves can access it on the go, or where we're thinking about sharing this out to a wider audience. This is going to be where we need to go to the Power BI service. So we can publish out our desktop-based content to the online service, and then from there, it's then accessible and can then be extended out further as and when we need to. And then the final step, and this is potentially an optional one, is that we can also look to consume this content within Power BI Mobile as well. So this is where we can look to have it so that within our smartphone or tablet devices, our reports and dashboards are surfaced out. We have some limited options there in terms of how we can customize the look and feel of that. So I'd probably say, as I said already, 60-70% of our time will be in Power BI Desktop, with the remaining time spent on the service and mobile, with probably a bit more of an emphasis on the service itself. So if you're getting started with this for the very first time, it's going to be really important that you have a good grasp of what is possible within the desktop application. And we'll be jumping into the demonstration shortly to sort of give you a feel for what's possible here. So really, we're going to be using Power BI to sort of achieve these key aims on here in terms of getting our data for the very first time, perform some analysis on this, start to think about ways in which we can visualize this, publish this content out so it can be made available to a wider audience, and then collaborate and iterate further on that as and when we need to. So the typical way in which we bring this together will be having a dashboard of some description. The dashboard will typically be a single page, sometimes referred to as a canvas, that can tell a story about our data through different visualizations. And we can create these very quickly and easily in the online service, simply just by selecting a visual that we're most interested in and then pin this onto a dashboard, either an existing one or a brand new one that we would look to create. In some occasions, when we're looking to crunch our data and find out what's going on there, it can sometimes be faster simply just to type a question about what we're looking for using a natural language query. So the nice thing about Power BI is that it has got full support for this via our Q&A feature. So we can simply just type in a question for what we want, and then the Q&A engine will interpret that and generate the most appropriate visualization for us based on the question that we're asking. If maybe certain points aren't quite what we expect, we can look to maybe add on additional qualifications or statements and continue just to rephrase what we want in until we get the data looking exactly how we want to. So it provides a very interactive and fast experience, something that we can build out within our desktop application, also in the Power BI Online service, and acts as an additional way in which our users can actually find out more about their data and generate additional visualizations on the fly. If moving on from there, we can look to use the Quick Insights feature, and this will be quite useful if we've maybe got a brand new data set that we aren't too sure, what is going to be the best areas to start in terms of from an investigation standpoint. With the Quick Insights feature, we can effectively just do a scan of our underlying data set. From there, Power BI will then suggest a range of different insight cards that show some interesting correlations or information points that it's been able to determine from our data set. And if any of these are of potential interest to us, we can very quickly and easily grab and pin these and add these onto a dashboard and use them as part of our overall solution. So generally a good tool for us to use, again, if we're in that state where we're not too sure exactly what's going to be present in there within our data set. We can go a bit further, and this is where potentially from a developer standpoint, we've got some value on here that we can bring into the equation. So we have a range of out-of-the-box visualizations that we can look to bring into Power BI, but we can also look to build out our own as well. So if we are familiar with how to work with the R scripting language or other languages such as perhaps Python or TypeScript, we can actually go in and build our own custom visualizations on top of Power BI, which can then connect to our underlying data and then service this out in a variety of different sort of ways. And these visuals that we create can be just for our own personal consumption, or we could also as well maybe look to publish these out onto AppSource as well and make them available to our end users or clients as well. And you can do some pretty fun and interesting things here. Everything from maybe a visual on here that shows us the discrete parts in an engine, through to visualizations that will represent our data as a fish in a big aquarium. So the bigger a data point, the bigger the fish is. So potentially covering all of your potential needs there, from a visualization standpoint. From there, we can then look to publish out our content into the online service. As I mentioned before, this will typically be the point where we're then thinking about collaborating with a wider audience, or where we just simply want to have access to our reports on the go. Once the content's been published out to the online service, this could then be maybe shared to a much wider audience, and we have the ability to be able to embed our content onto maybe a public website, into maybe a SharePoint list, and also as well in other areas of the Power Platform, as we'll hopefully see in the demonstration in a short while. We can also look to integrate this along other Microsoft services as well. So we've got support for being able to work with things like Office 365 groups, or M365 groups as they're called these days. We can look to use Excel data and pin these live charts into our Power BI dashboards straight from Excel. We can view Excel spreadsheets through support for Excel Online, and we've got good integration touch points into different Power Platform services as well, which we'll see very shortly as part of the demonstration. Then with the Power BI mobile application, we can look to take these different analytics on the go, show our data in a variety of different ways, get push notifications through when certain alerts occur based on what our underlying data is doing, and provide really bespoke views for our content so they can be easily consumed either in sort of portrait mode, as we can see here, or maybe on our tablet devices as well. So with Power BI Desktop becomes really an important tool for us to use on here in terms of not only allowing us to explore our data for the first time, but also to give us the ability to build out these reports and to sort of do this in a drag and drop sort of fashion. It should be as straightforward as building out a PowerPoint slide deck when it comes to building out a report. And as we mentioned, if we need to bring in any custom visualizations, if we need to integrate with Python or maybe our R languages, to create some additional visualizations, this becomes very easy for us to do. From there, we can then look to connect out to different data sources, and we can look to shape our data and get it absolutely looking 100% squeaky clean, so it can then be used across the organization, because really people need to have trust in the underlying data source, in its quality, if they're going to derive any value from the reports itself. So this is going to be arguably one of the most important steps involved in our journey here. And the end result is that we look to publish this out into the online Power BI service with the ability to also do this from Excel as well. And from there, we've built out a completely self-service solution that anybody can use. We can give access out to this. We can maybe give people the Power BI desktop application themselves, and they can actually use this to connect up to the data sources we produce, or this can also be done from Excel as well, potentially. So lots of different options on here, and we can cater for all ends of the spectrum when we're sort of building this out for the first time. So all of this sounds really good, but obviously the proof is really in the pudding. So let's jump into a demonstration now and just see what we can actually do with this tool. So on my browser tab over here, I've got a very simple model-driven Power App that I've built out before, and this is being used to host some financial data within our organization. So it's really just information about the different products that we sell, the units that have been sold, and the key value points that are going to be most interesting to us. So looking at the data at this sort of view level, we're not really going to be able to discern anything useful from this. This is where we can look to bring in Power BI into the equation to transform this rather boring list of data on here into something that's going to be useful for us from a reporting standpoint. So with that in mind, I can look to jump into the Power BI desktop application. So I've already brought in the data into my model over here directly from the DATAVERSE environment. And if I wanted to, I could look to bring in data from other tables that are present in DATAVERSE as well, simply just by selecting them from the list up here. And we can see we've got a full list of every single table available to us within the current DATAVERSE environment. Or if I wanted to, I could also look to see what other data sources Power BI supports. And we'll see from the list of different options over here, we've got quite a lot of choice on here. So literally, different Azure-based services, different third-party products like Asana, Azure Cost Management, lots of choice down here. And we can go as deep or as high level as possible on here. Typically, as we say, if we're just getting started with the Power Platform for the very first time, DATAVERSE will be a fairly popular option that we've got available to us here. Now, typically, when we brought data into Power BI for the first time, we'll need to do some transformation to it to get it looking exactly how we want it to. And this is where we can look to bring in the capabilities of our Power Query editor into the equation, which can access simply by selecting Transform Data at the top up here. So what's nice about this is I get a really accurate preview of how my data looks within here. And I can then start to perform additional transformations to get it looking exactly how I want it to over here. So as an example, we can see over here, we've got a unit sold column, which at the moment is reporting on half sold quantities for our different sort of units. That really doesn't make too much sense from a business reporting standpoint. So I can very quickly and easily go in, select the icon at the top up here, and change this to a completely different data type. And we can see that then automatically transforms the data, and I get that real-time feedback there just to confirm that what I've done is what I expect it to, or expect to be. I can go a step further. I can maybe apply some formatting rules to this data. So maybe as an example, for the segment column, I want to maybe set this to uppercase, so it stands out a bit more from an application standpoint. So I can use the formatting settings up here just to change that, and again, apply that transformation step very quickly. I can maybe look to rename some of these columns. So maybe at the moment, month name over here we want it to be maybe something a bit more user-friendly from a description standpoint. So I can just replace that and rename that as month, like so. I wanted to do the same for the other columns as well. I can also look to filter my data. So maybe I'm only interested in certain product ranges. So maybe, for example, the Montana product was discontinued last year. So I can go into here and just deselect that very quickly, and the data automatically refilters itself accordingly as we're sort of going through and applying these sort of changes. And the more eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that as I've been doing those various steps over here, we've had new lines appear on the right-hand side over here. So every transformation we do in Power BI will be converted into an applied step, which then allows us to very quickly go back and see everything that we've done to this model to modify it. So we can see that as we click through this, the data and the view sort of updates and reverts itself. And if we wanted to, we can maybe look to remove any steps that we no longer think are relevant to us. So as we're sort of going through this report, as we're sort of building and developing it out, it becomes very easy for us to revert back. And also, if we maybe have a problem at all, we can very sort of quickly and figure out exactly where the problem is and fix it accordingly. So my data's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to close and apply that to apply those different transformations. And with that, then we're going to be pretty close to start to think about building out some visualizations for this report. Just going to be applying the changes now and just refreshing the data in the model. And then we should be able to see that, yeah, we've got some slightly different values that have been suggested there, and we can see the end result of our changes. So one of the things we typically need to do to ensure that we can model the data and represent it in the best way is to create some additional formulas in the model that can do things like maybe aggregations, or also allow us to support maybe date-based filtering and things like that. So what I can look to do is select the option up here to create a new measure. I can use the capabilities as part of my DAX formula language to be able to maybe create a new aggregate. So in this case, I want to calculate the total number of units that have been sold. And I can use this Excel-like language to very quickly write a formula that's going to go over and iterate through all of my units sold and return me a total sum value on that. And that can then be something that I can then use as part of my report as I start to build things out. With DAX as well, I can also use this to actually author and create new tables as well in the model. So in this case, I can maybe click on the option here for new table. And typically for most Power BI reports, if we're looking to do some date-based filtering and analysis, we would need to ensure that we've got a date dimension built into the model, which we can then use to be able to apply appropriate filters. So in this case, all I'm going to be doing is using, again, this DAX formula language. There's a function on here called calendar, which allows us to return a list of dates between the two ranges that we specify. So in this case, we're getting every single date from 2013 and 2014. And if I hit return now, I should see that we then get just under 730 different rows, a row for every single date in the range that I specified. And with that created and declared, I can now click on the model view down here to see how my data is represented. And I can very quickly and easily create a relationship between these two different objects to support some of the development work we're going to be doing shortly. So in this case, what I can do is I can just grab the column from the calendar table. Sorry, the other way around it should be, drag the column from here on top of here. And now I've got a relationship that's been created, a one-to-many relationship between these two objects. Relationships will be pretty important as we start to build out more advanced reports and we start to do different sort of filtering and analysis on this. So now we can start to think about building out our report. And the first thing our report is going to need is a snazzy title of some description. So I can look to maybe add in a text box up here and just type in a value over here. So I'm just going to call this our executive summary finance report. At the moment, that is looking a little bit on the small side. So what we can do instead is maybe just increase the size of this to 20, like so. Maybe make it a bit more bolder over there, and then just extend that out so it's sort of covering the top of there, like so. Now I can start thinking about adding some visuals into the report itself. And adding on a new visual is as straightforward as simply just dragging and dropping the appropriate value that I'm interested in onto the canvas. So I do this for my profit over here. We can see that it's automatically then going to generate me a visual that shows me the sum of the profit for every single record in the data set. I can then go a step further and look to maybe drag in additional columns to then change how this looks. So I can maybe grab the date column from our calendar table. Now we can see how our data has been represented across the different years there, like so. I can then look to change the hierarchy of this, so maybe just make it just a simple date as opposed to a hierarchy across different years. So now I can see how we're doing on a month-by-month basis. And then maybe I decide I don't want this as a sort of bar chart sort of or cluster column chart view. I want this as a line chart instead. So again, I can just make that change very quickly, drag and drop this across the report, and until I've got it exactly how I want it to be. And here I can then start to understand how we're doing from a performance standpoint. And in fact, we can see that December 2014 has been our most profitable month to date here. Now I can start to maybe add on maybe a map visual, so I can view my data in some slightly different sort of ways. So in this case, there is it's going to be a case that it's going to be disabled by default on our tenant, but not to worry, we can actually fix that fairly quickly just by jumping into the online service. This is a setting that's been enabled by default on most new tenants now, just to ensure that you're not accidentally sharing data out without you not intending this to be done so. So in this case, just need to enable a setting on here. Map and field map visuals, I just need to make sure it's been enabled. Looks like it is on here. So maybe we just might need to push it out to the service just to see if it's working on there. Or it might be files, options, settings. Let's just make sure we've enabled this within the security tab down here as well. So there should be an option down here. So use map and field map visuals, press OK. Maybe let's just add that back on again. And hopefully we should see, yep, there we go. Nice, lovely map. So now we can see our data represented by the different sort of countries. But again, maybe we want to actually see how we're doing from a profit standpoint. So again, just drag and drop the profit column over here. And now we can very quickly see that from a profit standpoint, we're doing a lot better in Europe compared to North America, which is really good to see. So I can then take this visual, maybe just look to drag it up here. So it's maybe just at the very top up here like so. And then I just want to add in a final visual down here that's going to show me how our sales are doing based on product and segment. So in this case, what I can do is multi-select multiple columns on the right-hand side for the information points that I'm interested in. So in this case, it's going to be segment, sales, and also profit. And then we can then look to convert this into a cluster column chart to see how we're doing across these different sort of values down here. What I might also just need to do as well is just adjust the values here ever so slightly. So profit, sales, should be product instead. So let's fix that there like so. In fact, I might just start again on that one. So the values on here should be our sales. They should be our product. And then finally segment. Okay, that's looking more like we want it to be. So now we can see how we're doing across these different categories over here. And then finally, we can look to maybe add in a slicer to this report as well, just to get it actually, so we can actually filter based on different date ranges. So again, I can just maybe drag in the date column over here, and it's going to create me a table visual by default, but I can override that and instead use a slicer instead to be able to sort of work with this data. So in this case, by default, the slicer appears as a list of dates based on quarter, year, month, and day like so. We just need to perform some modifications to this ever so slightly. So in this case, we need to remove the quarter and the day values over here, just to make that a bit nicer. We might just need to adjust some of these visuals over here, just so that we can get good visibility over all of this here, like so. Expand that out and down there like so. And now we can see we've got a slicer visual on here that we can then use to just select maybe 2013 as an example, maybe select just 2014, and really just home in onto the precise data that we're most interested in. So at this point, there's maybe some further things that I could do to the report itself to get it looking nicer. So as an example, maybe I could look to change the theme of the report, maybe to maybe a colorblind safe theme as an example. I could look to maybe modify some of the visuals themselves, maybe by navigating to the format options down here. It gives us a variety of different options that we can potentially use. But at this point, I'm going to actually look to or think about pushing out this report into the online service. So it's always important that I save my changes before I do this. And then we can look to publish this out to a workspace. But what I would need to do, first of all, to support some of the things we're going to be doing shortly, is just create a new workspace in the online portal. So provided we've got a Power BI Professional subscription, we can go in and freely create any additional workspaces that we need. So I'm going to call this my Reactor demo. So by default, this workspace is going to be empty by default. And then all I need to do over here is click on the publish icon. We should be able to see a full list of all the different workspaces I've got on the tenant. So I can just select my demo one like so. And in a few short seconds, we should be able to see when we go into the online portal, we'll have a brand new report and data set on here that we can look to select and work with. So Power BI always splits both of these components out into separate things on there. And that means that if we wanted to, we could create additional reports targeting the same data set if we wanted to. When we click onto report over here, we should see the view will mirror exactly what we've just developed locally. It also remembers such as well our different slicer values and other details as well. Now, next step from here would be I'd maybe want to look to go and create maybe some a dashboard based on this view over here. So what I can look to do is select the pin visual icon on any of these visuals over here like so. So maybe just call this our executive dashboard as an example. Pin this visual onto there and just continue to do so for each of these different visualizations over here. Grab all of the visuals that I'm most interested in and then look to open up the dashboard by clicking the button over here. So the key thing to remember with dashboards is that we must be in the online service to create these. We can't create these locally in the Power BI desktop application. What we can do from here is look to maybe adjust some of the different sort of visuals or pin visuals over here to get it looking exactly how we want to. We could also as well maybe look to ask a question against our data. So we get some suggestions down here of potential things that we could be interested in. So I can maybe do, for example, total countries by total units sold. So it gives me a nice visual pre-generated for me. All I then need to do is just click on the pin visual icon, add that into the very same dashboard. And now I've got see down here a complete view of all of that there, which I can then just adjust to suit my purposes. So this all looks pretty nice. We've got some nice visual surface out on here, but wouldn't it be good if we could actually surface this out within this model-driven app over here to actually see data in interesting ways? Well, fortunately, thanks to some of the options that we've got from a extensibility standpoint within the Power Platform, we can look to maybe make these modifications. So I'm just going to jump into my model-driven app that have been built out already for my financial management solution. And what I can do within my solution is look to add in a Power BI embedded dashboard. So what I can look to do is actually navigate into the workspace that we should have created a few moments ago. And we can see on there, there's our executive dashboard that we created a few moments ago. So I can actually create this as a linked item to our Power BI solution and then have this as something that is then workable in the context of our model-driven apps and also in DATAVERSE as well. So after a few moments with that dashboard created, all I now would need to do is go into my model-driven app designer over here. And in a few seconds, it should just be a case that I can go into the appropriate sitemap area down here, add in a new sub area of type dashboard, and we should be able to see that our new dashboard should be created. What I might just need to do though is just navigate back for a second and just do a very quick publish all. If things don't always appear exactly as you expect them to, then it might be that a publish has not yet taken place. So that's my top tip for today from a Power App standpoint. Always make sure we do publish all first. So we'll give that a second just to finish. Usually takes just a few moments. Whilst we're waiting, if we wanted to, we're ready to go. So let's just jump back then. Okay, so with that published, let's jump back over to our model-driven app designer. And we should hopefully be able to go in and see our lovely new dashboard on the list. Maybe not. So one final trick can sometimes be, it can sometimes cache information. So will it be third time's the charm? Let's find out. Okay, so there it is down there. So just needed a bit of a refresh. Okay, so now we've got our executive dashboard down there. We can look to maybe move and adjust it up on the list down there, and then get a nice sort of immediate indication in terms of how this looks from an application standpoint. And then we just need to give that a quick save and publish. And we then should be in a position where we can look to test drive this within our Power Apps financial management solution that we just built out. Okay, so that's published. So I'm just going to jump back to here. I'm just going to do Control F5 refresh. So hopefully ensure we get the latest content surface through. And now we can see it's now able to completely load out that dashboard that we just created within the model-driven app itself. And this is something that we can interact with fully from a Power BI standpoint. So if we were, for example, to click on any of the visuals, it's then going to take us into the underlying report. And we can see this experience is pretty much like for like of what we have seen before in the desktop application and also within the Power BI Online service as well. So all the various different information points can be selected to adjust the report view. We can look to work with these different slices in a few different sort of ways. And if we wanted to, maybe look to open up this report in the Power BI service as well. And what's nice is that we're surfacing out data from the very same DATAVERSE environment that we can see down here. Any updates that we apply to that, we could then refresh accordingly, or also use direct query capability to ensure we get that real-time view. And also as well, and this is one of the key value propositions of using Power BI in model-driven apps, we can bring in data from other sources as well. So if we have got maybe other business systems that we're reporting on, and we need a way of being able to surface this out within a model-driven app standpoint, it becomes very easy for us to do this. A final thing that we can do as well, and we have got some time to very quickly show you this, is that our Power BI visuals can also be used within a Canvas app as well. So don't forget, with our Power Apps, we've got our model-driven apps and our Canvas apps as well. With our Canvas apps, what we can also look to do is maybe go and create a new app. So I'll just call this maybe my Power BI demo application, like so. And what we'll find is that on the app designer interface, we should have an option to be able to insert a chart from a Power BI tile. So all of those tiles that we created and set up within our workspace and dashboard can be surfaced out from within this view over here. And we can see it then gives us a nice real-time screenshot of that. So we can see there's our map visual over there. I can maybe look to continue just to develop this further. Maybe also as well bring in one of the other visuals that we created. So maybe the total units sold as an example. And again, have this working very nicely in the context of my application. So maybe provide a nice little home screen for our users, or just maybe have some data that's linked to the Power BI tile, and also as well have support for interaction. So we can do things like, for example, when we click on a visual, it then takes the user out into the online service. Sometimes that can take a few minutes just to update accordingly, but in terms of this visual on here, it should work. I think the issue with that is that it's a Q&A visual. So yeah. So this is where I say the value of Power BI really starts to come into play, because we can start to use it alongside other Power Platform components. And we also have the ability to be able to use these other Power Platform components within our Power BI itself as well. So we have the ability, for example, to be able to bring in a Power App, have a Power App that's rendered in the Canvas view. And as we update data into that, that can then update Power BI automatically. And also as well bring in Power Automate capabilities as well. So this is where the value starts to come into play, and where we can start to see that not only are each of these different Power Platform services powerful in their own right, but when we start to combine them all together, this is where we can start to do some pretty interesting things and get the most value over the overall solution. So make sure you try and exploit those opportunities as much as possible when you're working with this tool. And I hope this demo has just shown you how straightforward it is to get going and start to think about how you can apply this in different ways yourself within your own environment. All right, so we've just got a couple of things to wrap up on before we maybe have some time for questions. I can't see any more in the chat at the moment, but maybe there might be some that come to mind. So obviously we've done a very brief demonstration, in sort of 20, 30 minutes. This sort of stuff is not going to take, it does sometimes require some additional work and effort to get you to where you need to be. And this is where, in particular, the community, the business applications and Power BI community can be particularly effective to help you out. So you've got a variety of different MVPs and also evangelists from the Microsoft side who you can potentially turn to help you. So some of the people that I turn to very regularly will be likes of Laura Graham-Brown, who's based in the UK. You've got Ruth Martinez over in Sweden. And also the Guy in a Cube sort of blog and video series on YouTube is definitely worth a watch as well. The guys there who are from Microsoft regularly go into deep dives around new functionality, and they provide a really accessible way of being able to get into this stuff for the very first time. But aside from that, make sure that you get involved with different community events. So the fact that you're here today attending a Reactor event is a very good start. Continue doing that. There's a variety of different user groups and events taking place across the UK. You've got the SQL Bits conference next year, which is sure to have lots of sessions regarding Power BI, as well as user groups across the UK as part of the Power Platform UK user group, and also as well for those of you who are near Manchester, like me, Power BI Manchester user group as well. And the key thing I'd say as well is that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Everyone in the community is always very welcoming, is always very open. So just ask your questions, and I'm sure there'll be somebody out there who can give you an answer or point you in the right direction. Just get involved as much as possible. What have you got to lose here? And for those of you who maybe want to go a bit deeper on this, it's also worth considering the Power Platform School, which is going to be reopening again in 2023. And I've had the privilege of being involved with this group for the past 2 years, and it provides a really great forum for those as part of the for the BAME community, not only in the UK but also globally, to get involved, to get trained by experts and mentored, and hopefully at the back end of it, get a job doing this stuff day in, day out. So if you are interested, there are registrations currently open for the 2023 cohort. make sure you go to powerplatformschool.com to find out more, and make sure you get involved as well if you meet the criteria, because it will be a very great way of you being able to enhance your expertise in this area. So as I mentioned at the start, so some call to actions on here. So this is what I want everyone to do after the session today. If you have not already checked out the learning paths on the Microsoft Learn website, then make sure that you do that. So there's a really great one. If you just type in "Get Started with Microsoft Data Analytics" and Microsoft Learn into your search engine of choice, you should be able to find this very quickly. Create an account if you haven't got one already on the Microsoft Learn website, and just work through the modules and the learning paths on there. They'll provide a really great way of you being able to sort of get started with this stuff and to learn more. And start getting hands-on as well. So go away, download Power BI Desktop for the very first time. Maybe identify a data source that you can connect to in your organization, bring that into the model, and just start to experiment further from there. Add on some different visualizations and just experiment. You've got a nice blank canvas on there. You've got a no-cliffs environment that you can sort of use. And from there, you can start to think about how you can use this technology and actually start to apply it for your own unique situation and business scenario. And that is by far and away going to be the fastest way to learn this stuff. Just get hands-on, find a particular issue or a particular challenge in your organization, and use this technology to help, hopefully, to understand it better and to get a real grip over it as a consequence. So we are pretty much at time for the session. We'll think about just 1 minute sort of remaining. If now would be an extra time, if anyone has got any questions, please feel free to use the chat. I can't see any at the moment on here, but if not, then all it leaves me to say is thank you very much for attending and listening today. I hope you found this session useful and inspiring, and good luck on your Power BI journey and your Power Platform journey. And feel free to reach out to me using those details that we can see on here if you've got any questions at all. Be happy to talk to you about Power BI or the Power Platform all day of any week.